Hi, this is Kitty Wilkin from Night Quilter, and today I want to show you how easily my pollinate quilt comes together. I know that it looks a little bit intricate, which is part of why I really like it, but it really comes together quite easily once you wrap your head around the different subsections that you make. It's designed to be made in pieces, and then those small pieces are pieced together, which makes the whole thing a lot easier to chew. Kind of like, the saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Well, once you know where to take bites on this pattern, it will come together quite easily. So today I'm going to show you, I'm working on this rosette here. And as you can see, I have a coloring page that I've fully colored in, and I've drawn the outlines of the pieces that I'm making. So they're the main rosettes, the star connectors strips, the pie hexies, and the bee pieces. And all of this is included in your pattern. There are sheets with the different approaches to how to piece it. I'm going with option A, and so I drew that onto my coloring sheet. So, looking at this main rosette, here's how you begin. First, you start by making a 5-pointed star, which is easy enough. And again, all of this is included in the pattern guide with a lot of detail, and I go through what pieces to piece in what order, but I thought that a visual might be helpful, especially for those of you who maybe are on the fence thinking it might be too complicated, or you've ordered the pattern, it's arrived on your doorstep, and now you're thinking, okay, oh my goodness, now what do I do? Here's what you do. You just start. You begin by making a 5-pointed star out of the A pieces. Easy enough. I like to piece 3 and then piece 2 and stitch them together. If you're using your color guide, just make sure you're following. There's that 5-pointed star that I just made. I've got my pink that's exploding out of the center right in the right spot. Next, you're going to make a series of F pairs. The F shape is a honeycomb shape. It's a little bit longer than the 1-inch honeycombs, a little bit bigger than 1-inch honeycombs, but you just make 5 pairs. Easy enough. You make base 2 shapes, stitch them together, you've got a pair. Do that 5 times, and then you're going to add those to that first star you made. Now, how to stitch it together is entirely personal preference. I like to stitch along the inside first, so I'm going to try and finagle these because they're not stitched together, but I like to stitch it onto the A point, and then move on to the next one, stitch onto the A point, 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 all the way around. And then I like to stitch the seams moving outward. However, if you try that and you're having trouble getting that center point aligned to the center of your F pair, then I would recommend a different path. There we go. Start at the point and stitch down, and then start at the point and stitch down and up. If you have your next pair there already, like say this is stitched in place and you're stitching this one, start here, stitch down, tie off your thread, use a stay stitch, stitch a couple stitches together, and then double through. And then start again with a knotted thread, stitch down, and then along that seam. Again, it's entirely personal preference, so you choose what works best for you, and there's nothing wrong with experimentation if you try a couple. I have tried lots of different techniques in this quilt alone, because you never know which technique will be best for you for any given pattern. So feel free to experiment with that, but so far, so good. 5-pointed star, F pairs added on. Next, you'll make a series of A trios and more 5-pointed stars with that A shape. You're going to make 5 of these and 5 of these. I sew the trios on first, and those go right between the pairs of F shapes. And again, with this one, I just stitch right along the edge, but if you prefer, you could start at the center and stitch out, start at the center and stitch out. Once the trios are all in place, then you stitch on the 5-pointed star. Stitch, 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 or start from the center and work out. I'm still trying to decide whether to go for a dark gray or a more subtle gray. Feel free to weigh in if you want. I'd love some help with that decision. I feel like the dark gray might be a little bit too dark, but I do like the bold pop that it provides in the low volume, and it seems to go with my pattern. Anyway, back to the piecing. So you've got your center A star, you've got your F pairs, you've got A trios and A 5-pointed stars all stitched on. Imagine they're all around. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to make a series of G, H, I, J shapes. These I piece, the center is G, and so I like to first stitch the H and the I pieces on. I'll stitch along here and then stitch along there. And then I add the J's. Stitch along there, stitch along there. Make 5 of these. So far, so good, right? Then once you have those, you're going to stitch those right into there. So those get added right in there. And again, I think for this one, I did start at the center and stitch out, and then start at the center and stitch out and out. Depending on how long you've been paper piecing, what style works for you, how perfect you want to get everything, what your level of comfort is, you might be able to just start here and stitch right around. It's whatever works for you. Next, we're moving off screen. Don't worry, I'll pull it down. Next, you're going to make a series of KL. Let me make sure I have the letters right. The letters have changed through the course of KL, a few KL pairs. And again, you're going to make 5 of those. And those get stitched to the end of each of the 5-pointed stars that goes around. Now make note here, this is a very critical juncture. This top here, you want to make sure that this G, H, I, J and the K and L makes a flat surface at the top. When you're doing that, if you start here and stitch out, that might not always be the case. So I would recommend tacking right here. Just do 1 stitch to keep this point in line with the other pieces, and then stitch down. And tack right here where the next imaginary ones will be, and then stitch down. And that way you will be sure that when you get to the next round, when we're adding the cute little houses, everything will line up perfectly. And because this sits right on top of the series of shapes. So once you get that far, there's only one more round to complete the main rosette. And that is to take the little house sections. So it's the M house and 2 E triangles. You're going to make 10 of those. You're also going to make 10 pi hexagons made out of the D shapes. Now with pi hexes, I like to sew 3 Ds together, 3 Ds together, and then seam that center seam. For me, that gets me, a straight seam is a lot easier than a pi seam or an inset seam. And so I set myself up for success by piecing 2 pairs of 3 and then seaming them together. So make 10 and make 10, and then those inset right on, same as the others. The pi hexes go there, the little M-E houses go there, and then again, I like to stitch across the base and then stitch the seams going out. That's just my style. You do what works for you. So as you can see, making that main rosette, it really comes together quite easily. And once you know the pieces that are involved, it's quite logical. It's really not scary at all. So let me show you. Here's my main rosette. Can't see the whole thing because it's big once it's all together, but you can see there's the G, H, I, J sections. There are the little houses with the E pieces and the pi hexes, the stars. Once you see the different sections, hopefully that will help it all come together quite easily. So you're going to make main rosettes, and let's move outward a little bit. Then there are also the pi hexes in between. Main rosette, some are just solo. It just helps with piecing. You're welcome to sew them all together differently, but this, for me, seemed really quite logical. Then you have 2 stars and the pi hex connector. So this is a star strip connector, as mentioned in the pattern guide. This is simply 2 stars. Then these are the BC pieces. And so with stars, let me grab, there we go. An example of our 5-pointed star. These stars are the same as the ones from the main rosette. You stitch 3 together, stitch 2 together, and there you have it. with the BC pieces, I like to stitch them along this seam. I know some people have stitched along the long seam, but in my personal experience, for me, myself, and the way I stitch, stitching this wider open inset seam is much more accurate for whatever reason. And so I prefer to do it this way. And so once you have your BC sections, you stitch them on here. And again, same as before, I like to stitch on there, stitch on there, stitch on there, and then gently fold and stitch the long seams up the sides. And so once you have your 5 pointed stars and BC sections, you just stitch on a pie hex, stitch on another star, and you've got your star connectors. And so you make a series of these. And this one is going up next to my pink and red. Then there's only one more section that's left to stitch, and you'll have all the different components that make up this quilt, and that is the bee. The bee is fun, and again, it's still, once you look at how to tackle it, it comes together quite easily. And so here's my bee, partially finished. This pie hex is going to go on here. One more white pie hex will go up here. But with the bee, you again take it in sections. And first you stitch these 3 pieces together. You stitch these in pairs. So you make 2 sections here, 2 pairs, and then you position them and sew them all together. And then for the wings, again, I like to sew these 2 together and then sew these together and add them together, and then add this one at the end. Tackle it whichever way works for you. Once you have that bee, and I plan to shoot another video probably tomorrow or the next day on how to piece this bee specifically, because there are not acrylic templates for the center portion of the bee because it's in there so infrequently. But piecing it is just, the same way as you piece everything. One piece at a time, slow and steady. Once you have the body of the bee and the wings attached, then you have, same as you've already made, a house with 2 E pieces. That gets stitched onto one end and onto the other end, depending on where your colors are placed. And then you have 4 pie hexes, which, old hat, you know how to make those. Those are pretty easy. 3Ds, sew them together, and you've got it. And so then you'll have your bee section. Once you have all of your subsections, all of your chunks, as I like to call them, then they all fit together very logically. In between each main rosette is a star strip connector. Then you have, and it's all broken up in the pattern guide and on your planning sheets. But assembling it, it's done in pieces, and then it comes together quite smoothly. If you have any questions at all along the way, please don't hesitate to ask, because I am happy to help and happy to, address any confusion or share the tips and tricks that I've discovered along the way, because this pattern is super fun and I really want you to enjoy it as much as I'm enjoying it and as much as I've enjoyed designing it. So hopefully that's helpful, how to piece the quilt, and hopefully it helps you realize how simple it is. Once you know where your colors are going and what components you need to make, you just get to roll with it. And there are a lot of smaller pieces that you can bring with you. So you can sew on the beach, or sew at the playground, or sew on the porch, or sew wherever you want. And then bring it all back together and puzzle it together according to your coloring page and your assembly diagram. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or if there's anything that you'd like clarified, or a video on something different, and I would be happy to help. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.